Good morning.
Good morning.
Nice to see you, Sarah. My name's Cathy Kezelman, as you know, but I'm delighted today to have Sarah Monahan with me. And Sarah's a very new ambassador to Blue Knot.
I
So,
am very excited to be the newest one.
and we're very excited to have you. So, look, let's kick off with, why did you want to become an ambassador for Blue Knot? What led you to that? And
I knew when I moved back to Australia that I definitely wanted to give back. I just wasn't sure how yet, but I knew it was still going to be in the trauma or sexual assault space somehow. And then we found Blue Knot, and you guys found me, and it meshed very well.
yeah, we did find you. And why do you think it's important to talk about complex trauma?
I think that the easiest way to deal with it is to be open about it. I know that like when I went public, it released a whole lot of stuff. And basically that was like, and then writing the book was probably the most um releasing thing. And I think that the more people are aware of it, because sometimes you look at people and you're like, are they just having a bad day or what? And you don't really
Yeah.
think about the traumas that people have had. And I think all of us could be a lot more compassionate. And we all need to just have a little bit more grace with other people. And I think that the more aware people are of trauma, the more grace that they can afford people.
No, I couldn't agree more. And in this world today, compassion is, often missing,
Lacking.
and
Yeah.
it's just so important for us all. So, I know your journey's been far from easy at times.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering now where you're at. What does healing mean to you? What do you make of the word healing?
Really good space. I went through like, all the different levels of emotion and grief and trauma. And right now I'm probably in one of the best places that I've been. And it's been a multi-pronged approach. I think a lot of it was, letting people know that I wasn't just always grumpy, that there was
Ah.
an actual background for it.
Yes.
And then, like going through like writing the book and then talking to people. And then a lot of the healing came from people coming to me and saying, what you did changed my life. And knowing that I had not just gone through it, just, all of the hurt and the trauma and the pain of the court case just to do it, that it affected so many people. Actually, every time now that someone asks me to do something and they're like, we don't want to bring this up or whatever, I'm like, no, it's fine because I know that somebody gets something out of it. And sharing, I think, is it's the most cathartic thing. Like people always talk about it's good to give, but even in the emotional sense, when you put something out there and then you see the effect that that has on people and it comes back to you, it
Hmm.
makes everything worth it. And that was the most healing part of the journey, I think.
Yeah. And is that part of what's driven you to Blue Knot?
Yes, because I
Yeah.
think that, I went through a period where I took a sabbatical from public life and from
Yeah.
dealing with it because, it got to a point where it was overwhelming and I just needed to sit back and have a rest. And then I got to the point where I was recharged and I'm like, you know what? I'm ready to go again. I'm ready to get back out there. And this time, not just be about me and like, what it is that I'm trying to heal from, but now it's my turn to help other people.
Yeah, and that's very generous, so thank you. Now, this term complex trauma is quite confusing for a lot of people. So just in your own words, can you just paint a picture of what it means to you?
I think a lot of people think, like you get PTSD, it's just from one event, like, maybe you were in a bombing or a stabbing or, raped or something. But complex trauma to me means it's more a series of not necessarily smaller things, but it's a multi-layered thing. And a lot of kids I know who went through childhood sexual assault, it's not just one time. It's
Yeah.
the constant thing. And then it's like layered trauma with like, you went through a thing and then maybe you told people and you weren't listened to, which into itself is a trauma. And then, as you get older, a lot of bad people can see that you've been through a vulnerability and they will take advantage of that again. And so to me, it's this complex layer on layer on layer. And so then you have to dig down to, what was the first one and heal layers by layers
Mm,
by layers.
mm. And yeah, how do you feel you've done that? I mean, that's a great concept, and I think it is cumulative and compounded as you've described.
Yeah, and mine, like mine was multi because it was, there was what happened on set, there was what happened with my parents, and then later on the trauma of going through, being like
Mm.
essentially the first person in Australia to go very publicly go through
Yeah.
a case. And so I think I had a lot of trauma just from the court case. I think I'd kind of healed from what happened on set because I kind of just was like, that's just what happened to kids back then. Um, and then of course there was the trauma with like my mom disowning me when I went public, and that was hurtful for a long time. And then, I kind of
Absolutely.
reconciled that with, she didn't speak to her mother for like 15 years. And so I know it's not me, it's a her thing. But my brother and I are still close, so that's nice. But it's just I take each little piece as it comes and try to deal with that little piece. And I know that a lot of it stems from, the Hey Dad days. But at the same time, I've been to events recently where there was people from like the Hey Dad crew there,
Right,
and they were the people that I loved. And
right.
it reminded me that, there was so much good that also
Yeah,
happened on that set. Like, yes, there was that, but everything else that happened on that set was great. And
yeah,
so
yeah,
I try to live in those moments and remember how much enjoyment I had outside of that.
yeah. And you finding you're able to do that more as you've learned to heal and yeah,
Yeah. So
through
now
that
I can come
process.
home and
Yeah.
I can look at it and like, I still don't want to watch the show so much,
Fair
but
enough.
you know, I mean,
Yes.
it doesn't really pass the test of time anyway, it was
Yeah.
just like, but like now I see people and I'm excited to see them and and I go to
That's lovely.
industry events and I remember what it was like being in the industry and how much I enjoyed that. And a lot of the when I was coming home and I, go to all these little things, I'm like, you know what? It actually was a really good time in my life,
Yeah.
except for that. And so I focus on that.
Yeah. And so why do you think it's important in the broader community to have these sorts of conversations?
Because I think people can get bogged down in the one thing. And I think that, if we have conversations and we help people to recognize that things have happened, but then we can also, I think the first step to healing is recognizing that you had a trauma to begin with. Because if you don't recognize that there's something wrong, you can't work on fixing it.
Sure, sure. So do you have any particular messages you'd like to tell people listening? What do you want to say? I mean, you've said a lot already, but you've got a lot of important things to say.
I think find your tribe, find your people, find the people that will help you heal. And if you need to break ties with the people who are constantly dragging you back or not letting you heal, that's fine. Like everyone talks about blood is thicker than water and they forget the rest of the saying. But I have cut ties with people who have hurt me and I just no longer allow them space in my life. And I found new family and I found people who uplift me. And going through and finding, whether it's therapy, with
Yeah,
recognized services,
yeah,
or, maybe writing a journal and doing that kind of thing. Like I found that writing my book, and I tell everyone, write it down because
yeah,
it's the easiest way, and you have to actually process all of the
yeah,
things that you went through when
yeah,
you're writing it
yeah,
down. And even if you never publish it, write
yeah,
the book
yeah,
if you're going to publish it. But then, yeah, find people like Blue Knot who can,
yeah.
help you through things. And then, I always think it's great when like workplaces also recognize that people may
Mm,
not just be having a bad day, they may be triggered. And so
yeah,
we need to have things like that where we can go into workspaces and teach employers and co-workers how to be kinder.
yeah, yeah. And to understand that everyone's got their own story and a reason that they may be having a bad day.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And I think
yeah,
everybody has some kind of,
of course.
thing.
Yeah, of course. And you, of course, went and lived overseas for a long time and then, did obviously you're back.
Yes.
Do you want to just explain, yeah, why and how you got to come back?
So I'm married to an American. So I lived overseas for 20 years. And then I was coming back for like the parole hearings. And I actually, the day that they said that he was going to be released, I got a call from one of the reality TV shows asking me if I
Oh,
wanted to be a part of it. And I didn't end up being a part of it, but that was pretty much the catalyst of, oh, I've been accepted back.
yeah,
Because for a long time I felt like I was not accepted.
yeah,
Because at the very beginning it was very outwardly, please go away. And then slowly over the years, and then someone asked me to do a speaking event at the Women in Leadership Conference, and I was like, like because I was overseas, I didn't really get to see the change that had happened in Australia. And it wasn't until someone explained it to me, the difference that I had made. And I'm like, oh, and then, people were asking me to be part of things. And I'm like, maybe it's time that I can return home. And especially with him being gone, and I no longer had to worry about walking down the street and seeing
Yeah.
him because he's now in another country. And it was like, now is the perfect time for me to come home and like, enjoy
Yeah.
Australia again. Because I had, I've always loved Australia, but I have those negative emotions
Of
with it.
course.
And now
Yeah.
they're gone. So I just wanted to come home and just, really live that.
Yeah. And it sounds like you are to the full.
Yeah, I try.
What has changed in Australia, if in terms of complex trauma and responses to
I
survivors?
think now we are much more, we actually listen to people. We recognize that, especially, because I went and then there was a Royal Commission and then there's like Me Too, which came out. And then we had Grace Tame as the Australian of the Year.
Oh,
And that was the moment I knew that we had changed because we
yeah.
went from when I went public and I was getting death threats and people were like, you're just doing it for money or fame or whatever. And then we had Grace as Australian of the Year. And I was like, we have gone the full 180 and now we are completely recognizing sexual assault and trauma. And this was like to me that was like the golden moment of where we went. And I think now people are always talking about mental health, and we're talking
Yes.
about like employers now have to have mental health days. And it's so much different, especially as a Gen Xer, where everyone was like, have a cup of cement and move on. And, and now people are like, can I give you a hug? So,
Yeah. Yeah.
it's so different. And I think if you're in that boiling pot, you maybe don't see the small steps.
Yes.
Having seen it one way and come back and just being completely the opposite and different, like it's so much better now.
What else still needs to change? So it obviously has shifted, but there's
Yeah, I
always more
think
to
I
go.
think the
Yeah.
court system needs to change
Okay.
to make it much easier for victims because like going through the process is frankly traumatizing.
Yeah.
And that I think causes a lot of trauma. And everyone I've spoken to, says that that is just horrific. And then I think people still need to feel like it's okay. Like I think a lot of people still hold stuff inside, especially older generations that aren't quite ready to let it out yet because maybe it's just been bottled up for so long, or they're still here, our parents' generation in our head saying, just don't talk about it. And I
Yeah.
think it needs to be more about like we can it's okay. Like we can talk about it and people will be there for you. And I think everybody needs a little bit more education and training just to know how to recognize things and how to, deal with stuff gently.
Hmm. What would have made a difference for you? And there's probably lots of answers to that. And obviously, if this had never happened in the first place, obviously,
Yeah, yeah, that would be great.
but and without, I don't want to pry into your family, but more around, community responses and people who were friends who, didn't respond in a way you would have hoped for. Yeah.
Yeah, I think mine being the first was kind of almost a test case on how not to deal with it.
Yeah.
Just because
Yeah.
and it was so public, and I understand that it did come out of nowhere. Like people were like, I just popped up, years after being overseas, and it was never meant to be a big thing. Like it legitimately, we were just doing a magazine article where we were saying, hey, protect your kids, if you're going to be a stage mom, like don't always be on set with your kids. And then it went huge, like, and we were not expecting that at all. And there was a lot of meanness.
Yeah.
At the same time, when I look back, there was also a lot of people who were affected by it and who went to Brave Hearts and all of those places because of I had gone forward. So it's a mixed bag. And the more I look back at it from now, I can see that there was a lot more good than there was bad. But when you're living in that moment, all you see is, the hate comments and the bad things and stuff like that. So I think people could have turned off comments on
Yeah.
websites. Like when the news, like they always have the comments, and maybe moderate that better because people are reading that.
Yeah.
For people that aren't famous and going through it, I think it's just people just need to be kinder. Just,
Yeah.
be more empathetic and realize that, being mean doesn't make it go away,
Yeah.
make it any better.